we'll take a look at what could have been a very interesting type of ship in the Star Wars universe, the Sniper. All that and more on today's Star Wars video. Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. I hope everyone is doing super well. Today we're going deep into this space combat lore and looking at a ship type which should exist in Star Wars, but which apparently doesn't. A ship type which could have broken the mold and moved away from the traditional tactics of space combat to great effect. But it doesn't exist. Why is that? So the type of ship I'm talking about, the one I referred to in the intro as a sniping ship, is one meant to excel at one simple thing: long-range damage. There are a couple of minor notes in some source books claiming that Star Wars weapons work at incredible ranges, but if you watch the movies or the shows or read the expanded universe, that's clearly not the case. I mean, watch the first episode of the Clone Wars. Yoda in his escape pod is out of range of the munificents. Well, they're still right there.
That was a close one. General, I think we're out of range.
And I've been reading a ton of combat-centric novels over the past year as a part of my podcast, Tapcaf Transmissions. We've went all through the New Jedi Order. Right now, we're reading The Dark Nest Crisis, which covers the Swarm War, and consistently, ships which are hundreds of kilometers away are described as being out of range. This is, of course, radically different than many sci-fi universes, and everyone who's played Mass Effect, I think, remembers that one little side scene where the naval officer is lecturing some new recruits. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to play the scene in whole, full credit to the original uploader from way back in 2010.
This recruits is a 20-kilo ferrous slug. Feel the weight! Every 5 seconds, the main gun of an Everest-class dreadnought accelerates 1 to 1.3% of light speed. It impacts with the force of a 38-kiloton bomb. That is 3 times the yield of the city buster dropped on Hiroshima back on Earth. That means Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest son of a bitch in space. Now, Serviceman Burnside, what is Newton's first law?
Sir, an object in motion stays in motion, sir.
No credit for partial answers, maggot.
Sir, unless acted on by an outside force, sir.
Damn straight! I dare to assume you ignorant jackasses know that space is empty. Once you fire this hunk of metal, it keeps going till it hits something. That can be a ship, or the planet behind that ship. It might go off into deep space and hit somebody else in 10,000 years. If you pull the trigger on this, you are ruining someone's day, somewhere and sometime. That is why you check your damn targets. That is why you wait for the computer to give you a damn firing solution. That is why, Serviceman Chung, we do not eyeball it. This is a weapon of mass destruction. You are not a cowboy shooting from the hip. Sir, yes, sir.
So I hope you found that scene entertaining, and the principles here really define much of what we see with space combat in science fiction. Vessels usually fight at extreme range, and projectiles, like the gunnery officer says, won't stop until they hit something. Obviously, at certain ranges, it becomes more difficult to hit an enemy simply because of how much they'd have shifted in time the projectile is moving, whether intentionally or not, but that doesn't really exist in Star Wars. Now, you can say turbo lasers, for example, would give off energy through light and heat. They would thus have lesser ranges, and that's true. But I mean, it really is remarkable. The only time we ever hear a large capital ship focusing on range is in the rare case where a ship like the Anakin Solo is said to have long-range turbo lasers. Or the Onager, for example, is one of the few examples where we do see somewhat of a sniper ship. Corey and the mod team over at Empire War Expanded also created the Peltas, which is a really neat vessel for Thrawn's revenge. It's built around a big central cannon, a Mega Mazer, which does give it a range advantage and makes it a unique ship within the game, and if it existed within lore, also unique in Star Wars as a whole. But again, this is a fan design, still very worth checking out Thrawn's Revenge, the mod, and I'll link to it down below. Alright, so that's the status. Ships dedicated to long-range artillery-style support were not common, nor was it common that ships were outfitted for range specifically. Again, I'm sure there's others, but the only ones I can really think of are from Legacy of the Force and include the Megador and the Anakin Solo, with both of those ships getting the upgrades fairly recently in the timeline. I'm sure there's more discussion of the technology in that series, but I haven't gotten there yet on my reread. But if that's the case, why is it? Well, it seems obvious, and I've said this before, that space in Star Wars does not act like it does in our physical reality. I've long speculated, and I believe that this is sort of how the universe is meant to be handled aesthetically when they're designing things like space combat, that space in Star Wars is more like a liquid or an atmosphere than a vacuum. Say you're imagining a Star Wars scenario in your head. A capital ship is flying through space and its engines cut out. What happens? Well, the way I imagine it, at least, and I think the most consistent way within the universe, is that the vehicle simply stops moving. In the real world, a moving vehicle which loses its engines will stop accelerating, but without any sort of opposing effect, it's not going to just stop dead in space. But that's how I imagine it happening in Star Wars, and look at how X-Wings maneuver during battle. The X-Wing series, and the Rogue Squadron book specifically, talk about an etheric rudder used to help perform advanced maneuvers in space. The idea of the ether is one that existed in the real world related to early theories of space, specifically that there was some sort of medium in the vacuum through which things like light, and they thought sound too, might travel. That would also help explain why sound propagates. I never liked the explanation that there were speakers inside an X-Wing or a TIE fighter mimicking the sound of explosions outside. It's just sort of how the universe works aesthetically, and you can make up an explanation if you really want to, and I think the ether is a good one. Aside from that, the universe also doesn't follow our real general rules of relativity and whatnot, but I've covered that in a past video, and it's not worth recovering. Anyway, I bring this all up because I do think it presents an explanation for why Star Wars space battles are generally so limited in terms of range. Simply put, Star Wars weapons cost a lot of energy to charge and fire because they not only have to deliver that destruction, but also maintain energy it's losing through the ether. There are other explanations for turbo lasers specifically. Maybe the magnetic field which holds the energy together starts to fall apart over longer range and the energy just dissipates. I don't know, but the ether also helps explain why projectiles similarly don't see that long-range usage. It's not like the Mass Effect scenario where you're firing and nothing will ever slow it down until something very quickly does. In the scenario where the ether exists, there is an opposite force acting on the projectile, meaning that not only would it have a limited range, of course, but also that it would lose energy the further away it was firing from an opponent. I think this explanation does a good job of explaining how we see battles generally. When ships like the Megador or the Anakin Solo did have long-range weapons, they were said to be very, very energy intensive, and that makes sense. If you need to gap that range, you do so by pumping even more energy into your shots. This explanation I think is good because it provides an explanation for why the Empire didn't invest in these type of ships, i.e. they were more than happy to just rely on Star Destroyers for general purpose duties while the New Republic ended up being more carrier focused. But it does still leave the possibility for ships like the Peltast, which look cool. They look like sniper ships, and if you follow through the logic here, it's because they need all of that energy built around this large central cannon. That's the only way it can increase the range. So that's my explanation. Because of the way the Star Wars universe works, it's hard to fire shots over long ranges, even in space. This also perhaps helps explain why it seems like ships have longer range when they're firing on a planet's surface than they do in space. But another big impact is also starfighters. Many factions rely on starfighters for a major part of their offense. The further you are away in your sniper ship, the longer it's going to take you to launch fighters and get them into battle. You can, of course, account for this by having the ship stay away from the rest of the fleet, and that's something I'd like to see addressed in the lore and in some fun space battles. Those are my thoughts, though. Let me know yours, of course, down below. And if you do have a question you'd like to see me answer in a future video, leave it in the comments with the hashtag AskEck. See you guys next time. May the Force be with you.